Hi all, I'm Sarah Batchelor, Neuro-Spicy music teacher and still a teacher here in the province of Alberta. Back on April 30th, 2026, when the Elections Alberta voter data leak story first broke publicly, I made a video talking about my initial concerns and raising some questions surrounding the situation. At the time I said I wanted to wait until I knew more before doing a proper follow-up because I'd heard lots of rumors. Well, a few days later, here we are. And since then, more details have come about what was going on and the alleged misuse of the Alberta voter information. We know more about the groups and individuals publicly connected to this story and the legislative changes that may have helped create this situation. And of course, there's more about the growing concerns about privacy, democracy, and public trust in Alberta. So today I want to walk through the timeline of what happened, who's involved and what we know so far, and what we don't know yet, and why I think the story matters to every Albertan, regardless of political affiliation. This is not about UCP or NDP because this is so much bigger than that, right? This whole thing is about whether people can safely participate in democracy without worrying about how their personal information might be used. And as always, on this channel, I talk about a lot of different things. Alberta politics, of course, a lot lately. Public education, always. Neurodiversity advocacy, music education, and sometimes I just say the quiet parts out loud. So if that resonates with you, I'd love it if you would like, subscribe, follow, share the video, or join the conversation and share with people who would also like to respectfully join in the comment section with us here. So let's get into this whole big topic. First, let's talk about the background. So the story did not appear out of nowhere, obviously. Over the last several years, Alberta's political landscape has shifted significantly. We've seen the rise of increasingly organized separatist movements, populist activism, and political pressure campaigns connected publicly to groups like Take Back Alberta, the Alberta Prosperity Project, the Republican Party of Alberta, and more recently, the Centurion Project and organizations like that. At the same time, the Alberta government has changed legislation surrounding referendums and citizen initiatives. One of the biggest changes came through Bill 54, which lowered the number of signatures required to trigger a constitutional referendum petition. Elections Alberta currently lists that threshold at approximately 177,000 signatures, which is significantly lower than before. Critics argued these changes weakened democratic safeguards and made it easier for highly organized activist groups to push constitutional questions forward. But the supporters argued it was about direct democracy. And I think the truth probably falls somewhere in the middle. And the debate becomes incredibly important when we get to the data leak itself. So, according to Elections Alberta and public reporting, the issue centers around are Alberta's list of electors. So essentially this is a voter database which contains the names, the addresses, emails, copies of signatures, how we voted, if you voted. If you've ever been a registered voter in Alberta, you would be on one of these lists. So importantly, this was not allegedly a traditional hack. I want to point out nobody broke into the system and stole this. The allegation is that the voter data was legally distributed. So they're allowed to give it to political parties, and that's what they did. And then from there, it was improperly shared, distributed, and accessed beyond what the law allows. So according to Elections Alberta, approximately 2.9, I've also seen 2.8, but the number, 2.9 million, huge number, of Albertans have been affected. Public reporting indicates that a copy of the list was traced to the Republican Party of Alberta and allegedly ended up connected to the Centurion Project, where a searchable database reportedly became accessible. They made an app. So, Elections Alberta has stated that approximately 23 people may have received full copies of this data, but approximately 545 people may have accessed the searchable database. Honestly, that number's a little terrifying because this isn't just politicians or public figures information, it includes ordinary Albertans. This is you and me if you live here and have ever voted. Teachers, public servants, journalists, judges, law enforcement officers, domestic violence survivors, people who have very legitimate reasons to expect their personal information to be protected. And here's where it gets even more complicated. Elections Alberta itself has stated publicly that under the current legislation, which has been recently changed, once voter information is legally distributed to authorized political entities, Elections Alberta has limited access into what they can do. They really can't do anything after the fact. They can investigate. I mean, they can seek injunctions. They can issue these cease and desist letters, which they're doing. But according to their own statements, which, believe it or not, it's really rare that they even are making a statement, the legislation does not give them strong preventative powers once the data has already been shared. And I think one of the things that really shook people was the tone and wording of Elections Alberta's public statement itself. Because agencies like Elections Alberta, as I said, are typically incredibly careful, measured, and restrained in how they communicate with the public, what they share with us, right? This statement felt really different. I will share it in my description. The Chief Electoral Officer describes the situation as unprecedented and openly acknowledged the risks this creates for Albertans, especially vulnerable people like domestic violence survivors, and he quoted examples of people who've been reaching out afraid, right? This impacts law enforcement officers, judges, and other public officials. This matters. When an institution whose entire purpose is protecting electoral integrity sounds alarmed, people should be paying attention. And another thing I think people should know about is that the Federal Privacy Commissioner's Office has released a guidance and frequently asked questions document today for Canadians affected by privacy breaches and political data misuse, which I will also put into my description, because unfortunately this is no longer theoretical. People are now asking some really legitimate questions, and we have the answers to some of them, like what information was exposed? Your personal information. Who accessed it? We know some of that. Can copies still exist? Probably. Could this information be used for harassment, intimidation, scams, political targeting, identity fraud? Domestic violence survivors are reporting getting texts with words like "found you." So yes, it's a problem. What rights do citizens have actually when political organizations misuse their personal information? We're still figuring that one out, right? And honestly, I think these are really good questions because democracy relies on trust, and trust requires transparency and accountability. And that's one of the biggest concerns here, not just that I might get hit by a soccer ball. Because this starts becoming a story not just about a leak, but about systems, safeguards, oversight, and political decisions. Now, I also want to talk about Jason Kenney at this point, just for a moment. I'm not a Jason Kenney fan, never have been, but I think this part's important, and honestly, I think it's kind of ironic. So if you don't know who Jason Kenney is, he was our premier here in Alberta for a time, and he is a former leader of the UCP, United Conservative Party. He recently has publicly expressed serious concerns about Alberta's separatism, political extremism, and the Elections Alberta data leak itself. He has spoken out about his own information. That's why he cares, because it impacts him. But anyways, he's spoken out about it because an example of it, he was used as the example during an online meeting. So they're like, literally, dude, hey, look here. If you want to look up, for example, let's look up Jason Kenney. And they did this on a live stream, like Zoom meeting. The video is circulating. You can find it if you look. And to be clear, I do agree with him on the part that it's disturbing, it's dangerous. Occasionally, I guess Mr. Kenney and I can agree. But there's also a level of irony here that I like to, acknowledge, because my dude, Mr. Kenney, you also played a major role in building this modern system, right? I mean, this whole modern political environment, you helped create some of this situation in the first place. Your government reshaped Alberta politics, centralized conservative power, changed legislation around referendums and citizens' initiatives, and helped create the conditions where increasingly aggressive populist political movement could gain influence and legitimacy inside of your Conservative Party. And now some of those same movements, tactics, and networks appear to be evolving in ways that seem to be alarming even to you. And it doesn't make your concern invalid, Mr. Kenney. If anything, it really does make it more significant, because you, of all people, should know. Because when someone who helped build the system starts warning that parts of it are becoming dangerous or unstable, people should probably pay attention. And again, this is not about left versus right, NDP versus UCP versus... I don't care. This is about democratic safeguards, institutional trust, and whether political actors of any ideology should have access to personal information without stronger protections and accountability. Now, I want to be very careful here. There are still investigations ongoing. Allegations are allegations. Public associations are not proof of criminal wrongdoing, despite the photos of people sitting with people at different functions. And that distinction matters, But I do think Albertans deserve answers. I know we do. People deserve transparency about who accessed this data, how it was shared, whether copies still exist, what protections failed, and whether legislation needs to be changed. Because democracy only works if people trust the system protecting it. And when millions of people's information can it's not allegedly, it did, end up exposed through political networks, that trust is going to erode pretty quickly. So I've personally written both my MLA and my MP asking for stronger protections, transparencies, accountability, and investigations into how this happened and what safeguards failed. Because while this started as a provincial issue, I genuinely believe it now raises broader questions about privacy, democratic safeguards, political accountability, and potentially even federal oversight. And before I end this video, I want to say something else I think is really important. A lot of people feel pretty hopeless right now. I'm seeing the comments quite frequently saying, my MLA won't care, my MP won't answer, nobody listens, what's the point? Write anyway. Write your MLA anyway. Write your MP anyway. You don't even need a stamp. Submit the complaint anyway. Ask the question anyway, because silence guarantees nothing changes. And historically, a lot of political and social change started with people who felt ignored but spoke up anyways. Even when they weren't sure anyone was listening, even when they were told they weren't. Especially then, democracy is not just voting every few years. It's participation, it's pressure, it's documentation, it's creating a public record that citizens, that we're paying attention, demanding accountability, we can search for the answers we want. And whether someone agrees with me politically or not, I genuinely believe Albertans deserve transparency, safeguards, and institutions they can trust. And at the end of the day, regardless of where you fall politically, Albertans should not have to choose between participating in democracy and protecting their safety. I'll say that again for the people in the back. We should not have to choose between participating in democracy and protecting our goddamn safety. People should be able to vote. We should be able to sign petitions. We should be able to engage politically and participate in public life without worrying that our personal information could end up being exposed, searchable, weaponized, or shared beyond its intended purpose. And that is why this story matters. Not because of political parties, not because of separatism, not because of left versus right, but because trust in democracy is incredibly difficult to rebuild once it's broken. I will continue following this story and events, and if more information becomes available, I'll pop back on and update as things evolve and develop. I'm really interested to see how the federal government engages with this at this point. I know Carney is making statements. It's a lot, right? And I really feel very strongly that, whether it's Alberta politics or education, transparency is so important. So if that's important to you as well, and these sorts of things resonate with you, I would love it if you would like, subscribe, follow, share. Please comment, and thanks for being here. And as always, don't give up. Write anyway. Please, please, please. We can't give up now. Thanks.